So I looked at Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews 12 envisages the Christian life as a race. And it says, run with endurance the race that's set before you. And there it says that look to Jesus so that you won't grow weary or faint-hearted. And I think that's describing two different dimensions of what happens. So weariness is when you simply run out of energy. You don't have the stamina, you don't have the resources that you need to keep running. I'm not a runner, so I take this on reliable evidence that runners will drop out of the race if they run out of energy. They will burn out, literally, because they've used up all the energy they have. And so there's a risk that we haven't paid attention to our soul needs or our physical needs, and we simply we burn out. There's nothing left to give. On the other hand, he says, don't grow faint-hearted. And that's not a risk so much of burnout as dropout. This happens to people in ministry that they have the energy, but frankly, their heart isn't in it anymore. Maybe they even lose faith. They lose their faith, or they no longer trust in God, or they just don't find that they're able to care for people. And so I think these are the two risks that face us. And the answers to that, of course, we've got to pay attention to our physical health and our soul health. But in the midst of that place, when you're on the verge of that, of exhaustion, there are temptations, particular temptations that are there. And again, they're mentioned in Hebrews 12. So the writer talks about the sin of Esau. And what was Esau's sin? Esau's sin was that he sold his birthright for a pot of stew. And that was basically going for instant gratification, because in that moment his hunger was overruling every other desire, and he was willing to throw away the inheritance of God for that birthright. And that's the temptation to immorality. It actually says, Hebrews 12, don't be immoral like Esau. There are sins, temptations to sin that come in when you're in that weak place, that vulnerable place, losing heart, feeling like giving up. And then you think, okay, because ministry itself is not joyful, I'm not stimulated in that, I have no vision for it, I'll feed, whether it's the appetite for food, whether it's alcohol, illicit substances, sexual temptation, all of these things that we indulge in, it's all for instant gratification because we can't sustain that vision for the long haul. And then the other issue that's mentioned there is not a temptation to immorality as such, but to idolatry. So there's a funny phrase that is a root of bitterness. Don't let a root of bitterness spring up amongst you, which is actually from the Old Testament, from Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy, the root of bitterness is a person who stands with the people of God to proclaim God's praise, but in their heart they've turned after another God. And that's the idolatry temptations are where we go through the motions of even leading people in praise, even preaching, but in our heart of hearts, our love is set on something else. And those are not unrelated, because idolatry relates to the immorality that was Esau's sin, because we think that thing will satisfy us. But the idolatry thing, I think, is even greater than that. It's actually leading to a loss of the faith, that there's no genuine trust in God anymore. And that's simply because an idol, which could be our reputation, our fame, the reward, the congratulations, even the encouragement, which is a good thing that we need, but that in itself becomes the idol, the thing that we're chasing after, the bigger platform, the book deal, or the bigger influence. And so these are the particular temptations of ministry, and I think they are particularly acute when someone is in a place of weariness, because they're prone to the attack of the evil one. They start to look to this world for satisfaction. And so it's not uncommon that when people are doing ministry in a chronic place of low energy and low passion, that some of these sins really creep in. And we need to be very aware of them, very live to them.